Welcome back to Cheating Stories Hub. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate each one of you. Before we dive into today's compelling story, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. Now, let's get into this tale of betrayal, cunning strategy, and ultimate triumph. The championship game was electric. The stadium hummed with the energy of the crowd, their cheers blending with the glare of stadium lights. I stood in the bleachers, my heart pounding with anticipation. My son, Liam, was on the field. His jersey was streaked with sweat and dirt, his face a mask of pure determination. It was the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, bases loaded. Everything had led to this moment, years of practice, late-night drills, and sacrifices. The pitcher wound up, his movements slow and deliberate. The ball flew, and Liam swung. Crack! The sound of the bat meeting the ball reverberated through the stadium, followed by a deafening roar from the crowd. The ball sailed high into the night sky, its perfect arc clearing the fence. A grand slam. The stadium erupted into chaos. Fans screamed, leapt to their feet, and cheered as if their lives depended on it. I yelled so loud my throat burned, my hands clapping until they ached. Parents swarmed me, patting my back and shouting congratulations. My son. My boy. A hero. Pride swelled in my chest as Liam rounded the bases, his teammates rushing to meet him at home plate. He raised his arms in triumph as the crowd chanted his name. The celebrations began in earnest, the entire stadium alive with victory. I was caught in the joy of the moment, my heart bursting with pride, until I noticed Liam walking toward the announcer's booth. The crowd began to quiet, curious. The announcer handed him the microphone, and Liam climbed onto the platform, towering over the field. "Thank you, everyone," he began, his voice ringing through the speakers. "This has been the greatest moment of my life. I couldn't have done it without the incredible support of my team, my coaches, and all of you." The crowd cheered, the noise swelling around me. I smiled, pride radiating through every fiber of my being. Then Liam's voice softened, his tone shifting to something more emotional. "But there's one person I want to thank more than anyone else. Someone who believed in me when no one else did, who taught me what it means to be strong, to fight, and to never give up." A lump formed in my throat, my eyes stinging. He was talking about me. I'd been there for him through everything, every scraped knee, every tough practice, every late-night fever. My chest swelled with emotion. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling. "This victory is for him. For my real father. Jacob." The name cut through the stadium like a blade. The crowd fell silent. Thousands of eyes swung toward me, their expressions a mixture of shock and pity. My heart stopped. My breath hitched. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Liam's words echoed in my ears, "For my real father. Jacob." I couldn't move. My mind was blank. My body froze as I stood there, surrounded by people staring at me with confusion and sympathy. On the platform, Liam's face was lit with raw emotion, his gaze searching the crowd. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Jacob. A few rows away, Jacob stood, smiling. Smiling. The cheers resumed, hesitant at first, then growing louder, but I didn't hear them. The noise became a dull roar in the background as my world shattered into pieces. 18 years. 18 years of cheering from the bleachers, of pride, of love, of sacrifice. All of it destroyed in one name. The car ride home was suffocating. Liam sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, his championship trophy resting on his lap. My daughter, Emily, was in the back seat, silent, her eyes fixed on her phone. The tension in the car was thick enough to choke on. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind replayed the scene at the stadium over and over again, a relentless loop of pain and betrayal. When we pulled into the driveway, Liam opened his door before the car had fully stopped. "I'm going to bed," he muttered, grabbing his bag and the trophy as he hurried toward the house. Emily stayed put, lowering her phone to give me a look. It was the kind of look that saw through everything, calculating and cold. It made my skin crawl. I turned off the engine and stepped out, slamming the door harder than I intended. Emily climbed out of the car slowly, deliberately. She didn't follow Liam inside. Instead, she leaned against the car, crossing her arms. "You going to yell at me too?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with venom. I rounded the car, stopping a foot away from her. "You knew," I said through gritted teeth. "You knew, and you let this happen." Her lips twitched into a faint smirk, one that made me want to scream. "Knew what, Dad? That Liam isn't your biological son?" Of course, I knew. The sheer audacity of her words hit me like a slap. My fists clenched at my sides. "And you didn't think I deserved to know? After 18 years?" She rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with disdain. "Oh, please. Don't act like you're some victim here. You wouldn't have handled it back then, and you're barely handling it now." "Don't you dare," I snapped, stepping closer. "Don't you dare try to spin this like it's my fault. You and your mother have lied to me and to Liam for nearly 2 decades. Emily shrugged, unfazed. "And what would you have done if you'd known? Left us? Let Mom raise us alone? You weren't exactly father of the year material back then." I stared at her, disbelief coursing through me. "You're unbelievable. This isn't just about me. This is about Liam. You've destroyed him, Emily. He doesn't even know who he is anymore because of you and your mother." She laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Oh, spare me the sanctimonious speech. He's fine. He's a champion, isn't he? He's thriving. You're the one falling apart." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. "This isn't over," I said, my voice low and steady. "Not for Liam. And not for us." Emily smirked again, turning toward the house. "Do whatever you need to do, Dad. Just don't embarrass yourself." I stood there, watching her disappear into the house, the door slamming shut behind her. My fists ached from clenching them so tightly. My chest burned with anger and frustration. Inside the house was dark, except for the faint glow coming from under Liam's bedroom door. I wanted to go to him, to talk to him, to explain, but what could I even say? How do you fix something so broken? I sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, the weight of the day crushing down on me. My phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me out of my thoughts. I grabbed it, expecting another meaningless notification, but froze when I saw the screen, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about Liam. Tomorrow at 10. You know where to find me." My chest tightened as I read the message again, my mind racing. There was only one person this could be. Jacob. He had the nerve to contact me after everything he'd done. After everything he'd taken. My hand trembled as I set the phone down, anger simmering beneath the surface. Tomorrow, I'd get answers. One way or another. The coffee shop was bustling when I arrived the next morning. Its hum of conversations and clinking dishes did little to settle my nerves. Jacob's message had been terse, but its implications were anything but. He wanted to talk, to justify, I assumed, but all I could think of were the questions that had haunted me through the night. As I scanned the room, I spotted him in a corner booth, a smug smile playing on his lips as he sipped from a steaming mug. My stomach turned. He had the nerve to act so casual, as if he hadn't just shattered my world. I walked over, my steps deliberate. Jacob looked up and gestured to the seat across from him. I ignored the invitation to sit and stood with my arms crossed. "What do you want?" My voice was sharp, betraying the storm of emotions raging inside me. Jacob set his mug down, his expression calm. I thought it was time we talked. About Liam. There's nothing to talk about, I shot back. You don't get to waltz in now and claim him like some prize. You had 18 years to be his father, and you chose to stay away. It wasn't my choice, Jacob said, his voice measured. Anna, your wife, made it clear that my presence would only complicate things. She thought it was best if Liam never knew. I scoffed, leaning forward. And you just went along with it? You didn't fight for him? For your so-called son? Jacob's expression hardened. Don't act like you understand what it was like. I was young, and Anna convinced me that stepping back was the right thing to do. I thought I was doing what was best for him. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. Your absence left a hole big enough to destroy everything we built. Jacob sighed, rubbing his temples. I didn't come here to argue, Mike. I came here to make things right. Make things right? I laughed, the sound hollow and cold. You think you can undo 18 years of damage with a few words? Liam doesn't need you. He has me. I've been there for every scraped knee, every tough game, every single moment you missed. And I respect that, Jacob said quietly. But he sought me out. He has questions only I can answer. The words hit me harder than I expected. Liam had gone to Jacob? My hands clenched into fists at my sides. If you cared about him at all, I said, my voice trembling with anger, you'd stay away. Let him have the life he's built without you. Jacob shook his head. You know that's not how this works. He deserves to know where he comes from. To make his own decisions about what kind of relationship he wants with me. I stared at him, my chest heaving. This isn't over, Jacob. If you push this, you'll regret it. Without waiting for his response, I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. My heart pounded as I got into my car, the confrontation replaying in my mind. Jacob's calm demeanor only fueled my anger. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Back at home, the atmosphere was no less tense. Emily was in the kitchen, sipping coffee as if the world hadn't just imploded. Liam was nowhere to be seen. Where's your brother? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily glanced up, her expression unreadable. He went out. Didn't say where. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, threatening to crush what little resolve I had left. Dad, Emily said, her voice softer than I expected. You can't control this. Liam's going to figure things out in his own way. You just need to let him. I shook my head. I can't just sit back and watch Jacob tear our family apart. Maybe he's not the one tearing it apart, Emily said pointedly before leaving the room. Her words stung, but I couldn't dwell on them. I had to focus on Liam. Whatever it took, I had to make sure he knew who had truly been there for him all along. The house was unusually quiet when Liam finally returned. The slam of the front door echoed through the empty halls, jolting me from the kitchen table where I had been nursing my second cup of coffee for the day. Emily had been right about one thing, I couldn't control everything. But the waiting, the uncertainty, was eating me alive. I stood as he entered the living room, his shoulders slouched and his face set in a weary expression. He dropped his bag on the floor, avoiding my gaze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of unspoken words hung in the air between us, a chasm neither of us knew how to cross. Liam, I said finally, breaking the silence. We need to talk. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Not now, Dad. I'm tired. Not now? My voice rose involuntarily. When, Liam? After you've decided Jacob is some kind of saint? After you've erased the last 18 years of your life like they never happened? His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. That's not fair. Fair? I couldn't hold back the bitterness in my tone. Do you think any of this is fair? Do you think it's fair that I've spent your entire life building something with you only to have it torn apart because of him? Liam's jaw tightened. It's not about you, Dad. It's about me. About figuring out who I am. You already know who you are, I shot back. You're my son. That's all that matters. He shook his head, stepping away from me. It's not that simple. I need to understand where I come from. Jacob, he's a part of that. And what am I, then? I demanded. Some placeholder? Some footnote in your life story? Stop it. Liam's voice cracked as he shouted, the sound reverberating through the room. Why can't you just let me figure this out without making it about you? The words hit me like a physical blow, and for a moment, all the fight drained out of me. I sank back onto the couch, my head in my hands. I'm not trying to make it about me, I said quietly. I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me, he said, his voice softening. But I need space. I need time. Can you give me that? I looked up at him, my heart heavy. Do you really think Jacob can give you the answers you're looking for? I don't know, he admitted. But I have to try. The days that followed were a blur of tension and avoidance. Liam spent more time away from the house, and when he was home, our conversations were brief and strained. Emily, ever the pragmatist, kept her distance from the drama, though her pointed glances said more than words ever could. And then there was Anna, silent, elusive, as if she could vanish entirely if she just stayed quiet enough. It wasn't until a week later that the breaking point came. I was in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. The sound startled me, pulling me from my thoughts. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and made my way to the door. When I opened it, Jacob stood on the porch. What the hell are you doing here? I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace. I came to talk to Liam. You don't get to just show up here, I snapped. This is my house. My family. I'm not here to fight with you, Mike, he said calmly. I just want to see my son. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. He's not your son. He's mine. I've been there for him every day of his life. You think you can waltz in here and undo that? Jacob's jaw tightened. I'm not trying to undo anything. I'm just trying to be a part of his life. A part of his life? I let out a bitter laugh. Where was this determination 18 years ago? He took a step closer, his expression hardening. I made mistakes, Mike. I know that. But Liam is old enough to make his own decisions now. And you think those decisions should include you? I shot back. After everything you've missed? That's not your choice to make, Jacob said firmly. It's his. I stared at him, the heat of anger rising in my chest. Before I could respond, the door behind me opened, and Liam stepped out onto the porch. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. Jacob's expression softened. Hey, Liam. I just wanted to see you. Liam glanced at me, his brow furrowing. Dad? I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my composure. He just showed up, I said, my voice tight. I didn't invite him. Liam looked at Jacob, his face unreadable. Maybe we should talk, he said quietly. Liam, I began, but he held up a hand to stop me. I need to do this, Dad. Please. The plea in his voice silenced me. I stepped aside, letting Jacob and Liam sit on the porch steps. I stayed near the door, close enough to hear snippets of their conversation but far enough to give them space. Every word felt like a dagger, a reminder of the bond one feared I was losing. When Jacob finally left, Liam came back inside, his face clouded with emotion. He sat down at the kitchen table, and for a long moment, we just stared at each other. "Did he give you the answers you were looking for?" I asked finally. Liam shrugged, his shoulders heavy. "He told me his side of the story. Why he stayed away. Why he thought it was the right thing to do. And? Anne. I don't know what to think." He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "Part of me feels like I've been lied to my whole life. But another part of me knows you were the one who was there. You were the one who showed up. That has to count for something, right?" I leaned forward, my heart aching. "It counts for everything, Liam. Being your dad has been the greatest privilege of my life. Nothing Jacob says can change that." He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine. "I know, Dad. I just need time to figure all of this out." "Take all the time you need," I said softly. "I'll be here, no matter what." Over the next few weeks, the tension in the house began to ease. Liam continued to see Jacob occasionally, but he always came back. Our conversations grew less strained, and little by little, I began to see the boy I had raised re-emerging. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Liam turned to me. "You know what Jacob said to me?" he asked. "What?" "He said he regrets not being there. That he wishes he could go back and do things differently." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "But then I thought about all the times you were there," Liam continued. "Every game. Every scraped knee. Every time I needed you, you showed up. And I realized something." "What's that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Being a dad isn't about biology. It's about showing up. And you always showed up." Tears filled my eyes as I reached out to hug him. In that moment, all the fear, all the anger, all the uncertainty melted away. I knew we still had a long way to go, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were going to be okay. The next time Jacob came to visit, it was different. There was no tension, no anger. Just a quiet understanding. We were two men who had both played a role in Liam's life, and while our paths had been vastly different, we both wanted what was best for him. As Liam stood between us, a small smile on his face, I realized that this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about love, the kind of love that shows up, even when it's hard. And for that, I was grateful.